So what we are talking about is so what we are talking about is so exception handling. In exception handling, I said so while developing applications, you come across different types of errors. So that is what I said: compile time errors, logical errors, and one more is a runtime errors. And I said what is a compile time error is an errors which occur during compilation of the program, and that errors you call it as which errors? Compile time errors. And all syntax errors are called which errors here? Compile time errors. And if there is a syntax error, program execution is not done, right? If there is a if there are errors are not rectified, if these errors are not rectified, okay, if these errors are not rectified, program execution is not done. In order to execute the program should not have any syntax error, right? So these are the things what we have seen, like runtime errors. So all exceptions are called as which errors here? Runtime errors. I said there are so many types of errors, and whatever statements which execute an errors, that statements you include inside which block? Try block. And if there is an error within try block, that error is handled by which block? Except block. So if there is an error inside the try block, that is handled by using which block here? Except block. Now except is a keyword, except block is error handling block. If there is an error inside try block, it is handled by which block? Except block. And try followed by one or more than one except block. So you are writing this try block and followed by except block and try block multiple, and each except block is handle one type of error. So this is what we have seen, and even I said which type of error is when it is occurred, right? Okay. So how to handle multiple types of errors using one except block? So if you want to handle multiple types of errors using one except block, then you write that except block with, okay, you write that except block with, okay, you write that except the block without any type. If you are writing except block without any type, that you call it as which except block here? Generic except block. If you are writing except block without any type, so that you can call it as which except block here? Generic except block. Okay. For example, so for example, so again I am writing a try block. Inside the try block, so I try to include some statements. So this program is again dividing it two numbers. So I'll try to take the value of n1 and the value of n2 equal to integer of. So input, enter what is that here? Second number. So you are trying to input how many values here? Two values. That is value of n1 and the value of what? N2. After giving these two values, you are saying n3 equal to n1 divided by what? N2. After that, I am trying to display the result by saying N1, N2, and one more value is what? N3. And I try to use a separator called backslash N. So you are trying to print how many values here? Three values. That is N1 value, N2 value, as well as what? N3 value. And these three values you are separating it with what here? Backslash N. So there is a try block followed by which block here? Except the block. Now these statements will raise how many types of errors here? Two types. So integer function rises which error? Value error. Integer rises which error? Value error. And this slash will rise which error? Zero division error. It means this try block rises how many types of errors? Two types. One is a value error and one more is a zero division. But I want to handle this both errors by using how many except blocks? One except block. But inside this except block, I should write some statement. What message I should write it? I should write one message which is common for. I should write one message which is common for two exceptions. But rather than that, I want to display. So otherwise, I have to display one message saying that, okay, value must be, what is the first one? Value must be integer and it should not be zero. It should not be which one here? Zero. So this message is a common message or not? Yes. This message is a common message. Value must be integer or it should not be zero. Value must be integer and it should not be zero here. And after that, I try to call which function? Main. After that, I try to call the function called main, right? So once you run this, it's asking to enter first number. So first number is 5 and second number is 2. Is it execution of try block is successful or not? Yes. Unsuccessful execution of try block, it will not execute which block? Except the block. So I try to input the value of N1. What is the value of N1? I have given 5. And the value of N2 is given 2. And 5 divided by 2 is what? 2.5. So I try to display the value of N1 which is 5. And the value of N2 is a 2. And the value of N3 is what here? 2.5. So I try to display all these three values or not? Yes. So that is N1 value, N2 value as well as what? N3 value. So there is no error inside try block. So I try to execute again. But this time I'll try to enter the first number as 5 and second number as what? 0. So what is the value of N1? 5 and the value of N2 is 0 and 5 divided by 0 immediately rises which error? Zero division error. So then Python virtual machine look for the except block of which type? Zero division error. Is it any except block with the zero division error? No. There is no except block of which type? Zero division error. But there is an except block without type or not? Yes. But the except block without type is called generic exception. Yes. So what is the message I'll get in this case? Value must be integer or it should not be 0. Okay, in the same way, if I run this program again, I try to enter the first value as 5 and second value is what? ABC. So is it 5? Is it 5 can be converted to integer or not? Yes. But can you convert ABC to integer? No. You convert ABC to what here? Integer. Then immediately integer function rises which error? Value error. Then Python virtual machine look for except block of which type? Value error. Python virtual machine look for except block of which type? Value error. Is it any except block of value error? No. But there is an except block with type or without type? Without. Now this block can handle any type of error or not? Yes. But first Python virtual machine look for the except block with what? appropriate type. Python virtual machine look for an accept block with what? Appropriate type. If it doesn't found an appropriate type, then it look for the accept block with what? Generic type. Now you can see again message value must be integer or it should not be what? Zero. Value must be integer and it should not be what here? Zero. It means both the types of errors handle using one except the block. But I want to know which type of exception it is raised. I want to print even exception type. Suppose I want to print in except the block. I want to print even exception type. I said no. Whenever there is an exception, okay, the function will raise the exception. So rising exception is nothing but creating which object? Exception object and giving to whom? Python virtual machine. Now, who is having the exception object information? Python virtual machine. So Python virtual machine look for except block with which type? Appropriate type. If it doesn't found, then it look for an except block of which type? Generic type. If there is no generic type, then what will happen? It will terminate execution of what? Program by displaying exception information or not? Yes. I want to know PVM. I want to know Python virtual machine hold which type of exception object. So for that, you are trying to use one module here. What is the name of the module you are using is sys. Sys is nothing but what here? System. So system is a module which provide the functions belongs to what? Python virtual machine. How your program will communicate with the runtime system? Your program will communicate with the runtime system by using which module? Sys module. So this sys module provide one function. The sys module provide one function called exception info. What is the name of the function? Exception info. So sys module. So that is used for communicating with what? Python virtual machine. You are asking Python virtual machine. You are asking Python virtual machine. Okay. You are asking Python virtual machine. Okay. Which type of exception you are holding it? You are asking Python virtual machine which type of exception you are holding it. So by using which function? Exception info. So this will return one tuple. This will return one tuple here. It will return one tuple and the tuple is having certain information. So I try to enter the first number. I try to enter what? Second number. You can see value must be integer or it should not be what? Zero. So what is the type of exception it is holding? Zero division error. And this is message. What is the message? Division on by zero, division by zero. And this is the address of this particular object. So how I can get that information? By using one function called exception info. If I'm writing t of 0, then I'll get the type. Suppose I'll enter 5 and 0. Enter 5 at 0. Is a type of exception it is raised? Zero division error. If I run this and if I enter a, then it is given. What is that error? Value error. So how can I get the information about exception? By using exception info. By using exception info, right? So this is how you can handle multiple types of exceptions. This is how you can handle multiple types of exceptions by using one one except block. Multiple types of exceptions using one except block. So that is done by using this particular approach. So you have a try block and you have an except block and there is one more block. And what is that another block you have is finally block. So there is a try block and there is an except block and there is one more block is there. And what is it by one more block here? Finally block. So here finally, okay, finally is a keyword. Finally is a keyword, right? Keyword which is used, okay, which is used to define which block here? Finally block. So finally block is not an exception handler block. Okay, it is not exception handler block. Okay, which one is called as an exception handler block? Except block. If there is an exception inside the try block, if there is an exception inside the try block, that exception is handled by which block? Except block. Okay, if there is an exception inside the try block, that exception is handled by which block? Except block. But exception is not handled by which block? Finally block. So finally is not an exception handler block. Okay, which one is called as an exception handler block? Except block. If there is an exception inside the try block, that exception is handled by which block? Except block. But finally is a block which is executed. Okay, finally block is executed after execution of which block here? Try block. Okay, after execution of try block, and what is that? Except block. Okay, finally block is executed after execution of try block. Finally block is executed after execution of try block, and which block here? Except block. Finally block is executed after execution of try block, and which block? Except block. It means, so the block of code which has to be executed, the block of code which has to be executed after execution of try block and or except block is defined inside which block here? Finally block. So generally finally block is used to write common statements, okay, of common statements of try and which block? Except the block. Or you can say finally block is used to deallocate resources. Finally block is used to deallocate resources. Finally block is used to deallocate resources. One minute. So this is finally block. So finally block is used to deallocate resources allocated within which block here? Try block. So finally block is used to deallocate resources allocated within what? Try block. Try block, deallocating resources. So there is a resource allocation. Two things are there. One is resource allocation and one more is what? Resource deallocation. Two things are there. One is resource allocation and one more is what? Resource deallocation. Resource allocation is there and one more is resource deallocation is there. Okay. So what is a resource allocation is here? See the scenario. Suppose within try block, assume that I open connection to what here? Printer. Assume that inside the try block, I open connection to what? Printer. I have to print what here? Document. How many statements I have written in try block? Two statements. One statement is opening connection to the printer. And what is the second statement here? Printing document. Written how many statements here? Two statements. Opening connection to a printer. And second one is what? Printing document. On successful printing of document, what I have to do? I have to close. Which connection? Printer connection. On successful printing of this document, I have to close. On successful execution of printing document, I have to close. Okay, see here, first scenario. So first, what I've done here, I open the connection to the printer, and after opening connection to the printer, what you are doing next? You are printing the document. You are opening connection to a printer and then printing document. So opening connection to a printer is successful, and printing document is also what? Successful. On successful execution of this try block, I want to close which connection? Printer connection. So that I have written in which block here? Finally. This is the first scenario. Assume that second scenario is, assume that I open connection to a printer. What is the second scenario here? I open connection to what here? Printer. But while printing a document, there is an error. While printing document, there is what here? Error. And that error is handled by which block? Except block. That error is handled by which block here? Except block. Now this except block handle one error. Now here you display error message. Okay, you display which one? Error message, unable to print what? Document. And after that, on execution of except block, even I want to close which connection? Printer connection. So after execution of except block, it will execute which block? Finally block. And where it will close which connection? Printer connection. So this is second scenario. It means the finally block is executed after execution of which block? Try block. Finally block is executed after execution of which block? Except block. Okay, normal completion. Normal means try block is not raised any error, then it execute which block? Finally block. Assume that try block is raised an error. That error is handled by which block? Except block. Even though it execute which block? Finally block. Okay, assume that opening connection to a printer is successful, but while printing a document, there is an error. But that error is not handled by which block? Except block. Okay, assume that there is one error which is not handled by which block? Except block. If the error is not handled, what will happen? Your program execution is what? Terminated. If the error is not handled, your program execution is what? Terminated. Terminated, right? Your program execution is terminated. But before terminating the execution of program, it will execute which block? Finally block. And close which connection? Printer connection. It means Finally block contains some critical message, right? Critical statements means that statement should be executed compulsory. I want to execute certain statements compulsory, like unsuccessful execution on handling the exception, not handling the exception. I want to execute certain statements, and that statements you'll write in which block? Finally block. But most of the times in application development, finally block is used for deallocating what? Resources. It is deallocating resources. It is used for deallocating what here? Resources. So whatever resources you allocated, that resources you can deallocate it by using which block? Finally block. So when finally block is executed, okay, the question is when finally block is executed. So finally block is executed, okay, in different ways. One is, okay, normal or so first one is after execution of which block? Try block. It's nothing but normal completion. Second one is, second one is try block, rise an exception, which is handled which block here? Except block. Finally block is executed after execution of try block. And second one is try block, rise an exception, which is not handled by which block? Except block, which is handled by except block. Third one is try block, rise an exception, which is not handled by which block? Except block. Okay, after executing finally block, it terminates. After executing finally block, it terminates. What it terminates? It terminates execution of which one? Program. So try block rise an exception which is not handled by which block? Except the block. And after executing finally block, it terminates the execution of program because error is handled or not handled? Not handled. So it means within finally block, we write which statements? Okay, critical statements. I mean, it is generally used for critical messages. Critical statements are critical. Okay, critical messages. These messages or these statements must be executed. That is what resource deallocation, like opening database connection. Opening database connection is what it requires some space at server side as well as what? Client side. Suppose if you don't close the database connection, what will happen? Unnecessarily, the server resources will be wasted and client resources also what? Wasted. To avoid that, when you open the connection, you must close it. Okay, that is deallocating what your resource. Now that kind of statements you write in which block here? Finally block. Getting on it. That kind of statements you'll write in which block here? Finally block. Right? So just to see, but we'll see this once we move to the concept called files. In files, we'll be talking again about exception handling. Right? Just to see how this is get executed. Try to understand the execution, but what is the syntax? So there is a syntax of writing this finally block. So this is a syntax of finally block here. What is a syntax? So you are writing a try block. So within try block, so what you can do is you can include some statements. So there is a statement 1 and statement 2, and you can write finally block or except block. So you are writing multiple except blocks or one except block. And here you are trying to include some statements and then followed by which block here? Finally block. You write a finally block and include the statement what? 5. So there is a syntax 1 and this is a syntax 2 here. So try block, within try block, so you write the statements, the statements which rises an error. So without except block also you can write which block? Finally block. But you can write only one finally block, but you cannot write multiple finally blocks. You can write only one finally block. You can write only one finally block. Okay. We can define only one finally block, but we cannot define multiple finally blocks. One try block followed by one try block followed by only one finally block. One try block followed by how many finally blocks here? Only one finally block, but not multiple finally blocks. Only one finally block. So you cannot write multiple finally blocks. Only one finally block, but not multiple finally blocks. Right? See the example here. So here I just display the message inside. So I just display the message saying that inside which function? Main function. So your program execution starts from where? Main. Okay, so I'll get the message. What is the message? Inside main function. Then after that, I'm writing a try block. And here I'm saying inside which block here? Try block. And here I'm trying to convert the input value. So enter any value. And this value you are converting into which type? Integer type. You are trying to input one value and that value are converting into which type? Integer type. And the try block followed by which block here? Except block. And here you are trying to handle the error. What is that error you are handling? Value error. Okay, I'll try to enter any value again. Okay, and here I'll say A divided by B. And here I'm trying to display the message saying that inside which block? Inside which block? Except block. Okay, and then followed by one more block. What is that block here? Finally block. So inside which block here? Finally block. Inside finally block and called which function here? Main. Inside finally block and called which function here? Main function. Now just try to understand this. And here I'll try to write one statement. Here I'm trying to write one statement. What is that statement I'm writing here is, what is that statement here? Continue. continue. What is the statement here? Continue. See here. So when I run this program, my program execution starts from which function? Main. So it will call which function here? Main function. Main function it will call, and what is the message I'll get inside? Main function. After that, control is moved inside which block? Try block. And what is the message I'll get inside? Try block. Then after that, I try to input the value of a, which is 5. Now 5 is converted to which type? Integer. I try to input the value 2, and 2 is converted to which type? Integer. Then a by b means 5 divided by 2 is a 2.5. Is it execution of try block is successful or not? Yes. On successful execution of try block, it execute which block? Finally block. What is the message I'll get inside? Finally block. And after that, will it continue or terminates? Continue. So this is a first scenario, that is on successful execution of which block? Try block. You can see the message inside main function, and inside try block, and enter any value, which is 5 and this is 2. So 2.5, and inside which block? Finally block, and then what? Continue. So this is the first scenario is what? Unsuccessful execution of which block? Try block. Unsuccessful execution of try block, it will execute which block? Finally block. Unsuccessful execution of try block, it will execute which block? Finally block. Now then, second scenario, I'll just run this. Okay, so this time I'll try to input the value of A is some 4, but the value of B is given, the value of B is given some, the value of B is given some ABs. So what is the value of A is given here? Suppose, yeah, the value of A is given. So first execution starts from where? Main. And what is the message I'll get inside? Main function. After that, a control is moved inside try block and display the message. What is that message? Inside try block. And after that, I enter the value of A is a 5. So 5 is converted to what? Integer. Enter the value of B as what here? ABs. Is it ABC will convert it into integer? No. Then immediately integer function rises one error. What is that error it rises? Value error. So who's holding this value error object? PVM. That is Python virtual machine. So what Python virtual machine look for? Exception handler. It look for exception handler of which type? Value error. Is it exception handler with value error is exist or not? Yes. Then this except block handle which error now? Value error. And what is the message I'll get inside which block? Except block. And after execution of except block, will it execute finally block? Yes. After executing except block, will it execute finally block? Yes. Okay, I said no. This finally block is executed after execution of which block? Try block. After execution of which block? Except. So what is the message I'll get inside finally block? Is it exception is handled or not handled? Handled. If the exception is handled, will it continue or terminate? Continue. If exception is not handled, then what will happen? Terminates. But here exception is handled or not handled? Handled. Is it your program execution is continued or not? Yes. You can see inside except block and inside which block? Finally block. And after that, what is this? Continue. Inside except block and inside finally block, and then what? Continue. Ring or not? Okay, just to try to understand this. Okay, how this execution is. Then there is a next scenario is there. What is the next scenario here? For example, so my program execution starts from where? Main. What is the message I'll get inside main function? And I'll try to input. After that, control is moved inside which block? Try block. What is the message I'll get inside try block? And then I input the value of A is a 5. Now, is it 5 is converted to integer? Yes. I'll try to input any value. Now, this value is what? 0. Is it this 0 is converted to integer? Yes. And after that, you are saying 5 divided by what? 0. Then immediately it rises which error? 0 division error. It rises which error? 0 division error. Now, PVM is having which error? 0 division error. Now, PVM is look for except block of which type? 0 division error. But is it any except block with 0 division error? No. It means this error is handled error or not handled? Not handled or unhandled error. If the error is not handled, what PVM will do? Terminates. If error is not handled, what PVM will do? Terminates. Terminates the execution of program or not? Yes. But before terminating the execution of program, it will execute which block? Finally block. Before termination of execution of program, it execute finally block, and then what will it do? Terminates. Then it will terminates it. Okay. Then it terminates it. For example, again, I try to execute. You have to test it by giving different values, and 5 and 0. Now you can see which block here inside finally block, and it is given error saying that division by 0. Because are you handle this error? No. Even though unhandled error is raised, it execute which block? Finally block, and then terminate the execution of program. Means some critical statements you'll write inside which block? Finally block. Means I want some statements should be executed compulsory. I want certain statements which has to be executed what? Compulsory after execution of try block, after execution of which block? Except block. Such statements you'll write in which block? Finally block. Such statements you'll write in which block? Finally block. Okay. Now you can see inside main function, and this is output. You have to check by giving different inputs. Okay. You cannot do it just like that, right? You have to check by giving different inputs here. You have to check by giving different inputs, right? So this is about which block here? Finally block. This is about which block? Finally block. Okay, right? Now this is how you are trying to do it. Yes. There is one more. Yes. There is one more keyword used with the exception handling. What is that another keyword you are using with exception handling is raise keyword. So this is generating exception. If you want to generate exception, you write some logic. So generally, suppose if you take this integer function, This integer function is rising which error? Value error. Means integer is a predefined function or user defined? Predefined. In the same way, I try to build some functions. I try to build some function, and if any error is there in my function, what will I do? I'll generate the error. So I said the advantage of exception handling, or error handling is, okay, is separation of which logic? Business logic, and which logic here? Error logic. Okay, suppose integer is there, integer function is there. Who's written integer function? Okay, who's written integer function? Is it predefined or not? Is it this function is a predefined or user defined? Predefined. Integer is a predefined function. Okay, and to this function you are giving some input. Integer is a predefined function, and to this function you are giving some input. Integer is a predefined function, and this function you are giving some input. And what this integer function is doing, it is verifying it. What it is verifying? The input given to the integer function is valid or not. If it is valid, what it is doing? It is returning the value. If it is valid, it is returning value. If it is invalid, what it is doing? Rising an error. It is rising an error. Means integer is handling the error or rising an error? Rising an error. Then who will handle this error? The person who called this which function? Integer function. Who will handle the error? The person who called the integer function. Because the handling the errors might be various from one person to another. Means from one caller to what? Another caller. Okay, the handling of this exception might be various. That's the reason. Is it integer function is handling the error or rising the error? Rising the error. Means error handling logic is not there inside which function? Integer function. Error handling logic is not there inside which function? Integer function. Integer function is just rising error. And who will handle the error? Caller will handle it. Caller. So that might be changes. That caller might handle in different ways in different situations. That caller might handle it in different ways in different situations. Because of that, integer is having only which logic? Business logic, but doesn't have which logic? Error logic. Error handling logic is not there inside which function? Integer function. Now you are handling it, you are calling integer function, you are handling that error by writing in try and what? Except block. And you handle in one way. Now somebody will handle in some other way. It might be based on which one? Situation. Suppose roll number, you enter roll number. Okay, if roll number is not valid, then you display the message saying that invalid roll number. The integer might be account number. If it is not valid, you'll say account number is not valid. So handling error might be various from situation to what? Situation. Because of that, is it error handling logic is there inside integer function? No. So it is generating error, but not printing the error. Generating the error. Generating an error. Rising an error. Rising is nothing but creating error object. So the advantage of exception handling, okay, the advantage of exception handling is, or error handling is separation of business logic and what? Error logic. Okay, so rising exception is nothing but, rising an exception is nothing but what? Rising exception is nothing but creating, is nothing but creating exception object, or error object, creating exception object or what? Error object, and giving to which one? Python virtual machine. Okay, creating exception object or error object and giving to which one? Python virtual machine. So that you are saying it as what? Rising exception. Rising an exception is nothing but creating exception object or error object, giving to whom? Python virtual machine. So that you can call it as rising error. And this is done. Okay, this is done using which keyword? Rise keyword. So this is done by using rise keyword. So what is the syntax of this is? So rise and it followed by exception type name. So this is creating which one? Object of the exception. This is nothing but creating object of which one? Exception. This is creating an object of exception. That for that you are trying to use a keyword called which one? Rise. Okay. For example, assume that I am writing my own function. Okay, assume that I am writing my own function, right? So assume that I'm writing my own function here. So I try to write my own function here. So what is the name of the function is multiply. Okay. A simple function I'm writing. What is that function I'm writing? Multiply is my function. Is it multiply is a predefined function or user defined? User defined. For multiplying, multiply function required how many values? Two values. One is A and one more is what? B. Okay. Then my logic is multiply should not multiply number with what? Zero. Actually, you can multiply number with what? Zero. But my function should not multiply number with what? Zero. Ring on. So I'm checking first condition. If A equal to 0 or B equal to what again? 0. If the value of A is 0 or the value of B is also what? 0, then immediately what you're doing? Rising an error. What is it error you are raising here? Value error. So I create an object of which type? Value error. Okay, if the value of A is 0 or the value of B is also what? 0, you are trying to raise an error. Which error are you raising? Value error. Value error. Otherwise, what you are doing? You are returning A into what? B. So multiply function rise which error? Value error. Multiply function rises which error? Value error. So when multiply function will rise in value error? If the inputs are what? 0. If the value of A is 0 or the value of B is 0, then it rises which error? Value error. Rises value error. Now, this is a function main. And because multiply function rises error, I should this multiply function main. Who's the caller of this multiply function? Main. Main is calling multiply function to multiply two numbers. Now result equal to multiply. I just enter the 5 comma 2 and then I display which one? Result. So after that I am writing which block here? Except the block. I should handle which error? Now multiply rises which error? Value error. So I should handle which error now? Value error, and here I should display the message saying that cannot multiply. Cannot multiply number with what here? 0. Cannot multiply number with the 0. So I called which function here? Multiply function. I called multiply function by giving how many inputs here? Two inputs. The value of A is given 5. The value of B is given what here? 2. If the value of A is 0 or the value of B is what? 0. Is it equal? No. It will return 5 into 2 is what? 10. And print the result as what? 10. So execution of try block is successful or not? Yes. On successful execution of try block, it will not execute which block? Except block. Now I'll try to input the value of A is 5, but the value of B is given what here? 0. Then is it value of B is 0 or not? Yes. Then immediately it rises which error? Value error. Then PVM look for the except block of which type? Value error. Is it this error is handled or not handled? Handled. So what is the message I'll get? Cannot multiply. Cannot multiply number with what? 0. Getting on it. So you can raise an exception explicitly when you write your own business logic. You are writing your own logic, and if anything wrong in your logic, then you are generating an error by using which keyword? Press keyword. Explicitly, you are generating an error by using which keyword? Price. But is it value error is a predefined error or user defined? Predefined. But actually, what operation you are doing? Multiply. If it is multiply, I should generate which error? Multiply error. If it is multiply, I should generate which error? Multiply error. If it is addition, I should generate which error? Addition error. If it is deposit, I should generate which error? Deposit error. If it is a login, I should generate which error? Login error. But is it all these error types are provided by Python? No. Because these are the functions developed by whom? Programmer. Then we should also develop our own error types. We should develop our own error types because these error types are used by predefined functions or not. Yes. Integer function uses which error? Value error. Even my function also using which error? Value error. In one program using integer and multiply, both the functions are generated which error? Value error. Is it that will ambiguity or not? Yes. So that can be overcome by developing your own error types. That can be overcome by developing your own error types. You can develop your own error types, and developing your own error types is nothing but custom exceptions. Is nothing but custom exceptions, or the same thing you can call it as which exception? User defined. Custom exceptions. Custom exceptions or user defined. User defined what here? Exceptions. Custom exceptions or user defined exception. So when existing exceptions, okay, custom exceptions or user defined exceptions, the exception type or error type developed by programmer is called which exception here? Custom exception or user defined. Custom exception or user defined exception. So every exception, I said no, every exception or error is one what? Class, or it is one type. Every exception is one class or what? One type. Okay. Every exception is or error is one class or type. So in order to develop exception class, how you are developing an exception class? Like this: class, and it followed by exception type name, okay, exception class type name, and this will inherit which class? Exception class. So exception is a base class for all exceptions in Python. Exception is a base class, or super class. Okay, exception is a base class or super class of all exception classes in what? Python. So if you want to develop any exception, you try to develop an exception by inheriting which class here? Exception class. So exception class is given by the Python to build what? Exceptions. Okay. Exception class is given by the Python to build what? Exception. I want to build multiply exception. Then how can I build a multiply exception? By inheriting which class? Exception class. If I want to build a login exception, how can I build a login exception? By inheriting which class? Exception class. How can I build a login exception? By inheriting which class? Exception class. How can I build a deposit exception? By inheriting which class? Exception class. So why you build your own exception classes? Because predefined exception classes already used by Python library functions. Predefined exceptions are already used by Python library functions. Okay, to overcome that, because I want to develop application specific exception types, I develop that okay, by building my own exception class. In this example, suppose if you take this multiply, multiply, multiply is there, multiply function is there. Okay, multiply function is there, right? Multiply function. So multiply function, when you give the input A as 0 or B as what? 0, then it should generate one error. So I'm developing one error. So what is that error I'm developing? Multiply error. So multiply error is a type of which one? Exception. Multiply error is a type of what here? Exception. It means it inherits the properties of which one? Exception. Generally, you don't write anything inside this class because this class inherit all the properties from which class? Exception class. I just write pass. Pass means empty time. Is this include any statements here? No. Then I'm saying rise. Which type of error I should raise? Multiply error. I should raise which error here? Multiply error. So here I'm trying to input two values by saying integer of input, enter first value. Now n2 equal to integer of enter what is that? Second value. Okay, and then n3 equal to n1. N1 into what is that? N2, and print n1 value, n2 value, and n3 value. So this try block raises how many types of errors? Two types. One is value error. Which one is value error? Integer function. So value must be which type? Integer type. Okay. Then one more exception it raises. Now which function raises error here? Multiply function raises error. Multiply function raises which error? Multiply error. Multiply function raises which error? Multiply error. So E should be capital. Okay, that is predefined type, and E should be what here? Capital. So exception class, in exception class E must be what here? Capital. In exception class E must be what? Capital. In exception class E must be capital. Okay, right. So in multiply error, I should say cannot multiply number with what here? 0. Cannot multiply number with a 0, right? If you see this one, enter first value which is 5, second value is a 2. Is it execution of try block is successful or not? Yes. On successful execution of try block, it doesn't execute which block? Except block. I try to execute again. Enter the first value which is 5 and second value is ABC. Will it convert ABC to integer? No. Then it rises which error? Value error. Is it value error is handled or not handled? Handled. So there is a message value must be which type? Integer type. Okay. I try to enter the first value is 5 and second value is what? 0. Then this 5 and 0 is sent to which function? Multiply function. And multiply function verifies. Is it value of A is 0? No. Is it value of B is 0? Yes. Then generate which error? Generate which error? Multiply error. Is it multiply error is a predefined error or user defined? User defined. Multiply error is a user defined, and you can see cannot multiply number with what? 0. Now this is what do you mean by clear separation of business logic and what? Error logic. So business logic is there in which function? Multiply function. Multiply function is not handling the error. Multiply function is not handling the error. Multiply function is raising an error that is handled by which one? Caller. Caller. Each caller is having his own way of what? Handling the exception. That might be changes from one situation to what? another. Okay, yes. Now I'll tell you one more example here. So suppose, assume that, suppose, so for example, there is a, yes, there is a login. I'm just developing one error called which one? Login error. Login error is which type of, login error is a type of exception or not? Yes. Login error is one type of what here? Exception. Login error is one type of exception here. Login error is one type of exception. Login error is that. What is the name of this here? Login error. And login error is one type of which one? Exception. So there is a dictionary. Okay, assume that this is a dictionary, user's dictionary, which contain the username is having username and one more is what? Password. Having username and having which one here? Password. Having username and having which one here? Password. So this is called which dictionary? User dictionary. So there is a function called which one? Login. So login receive what name? Username, and one more it receives is what? Password. So login function receive how many values here? Two values. What is the first value it receives? Username. And what is the second value it receives? Password. After receiving this username and password, it should verify. It should verify if okay, if user in, if user in which dictionary? User dictionary. If user in user dictionary, okay, and is there, if user is there in user dictionary and is there, and user dictionary of user means I get the password. User dictionary of user means this is getting the password equal to this. It means if the user is there in the user dictionary and if the password is equal to the password of this user, okay, okay, then what I'll do, I'll try to display the message saying that print, okay, print. I just display the message saying that user, what is the message? Welcome. User welcome, otherwise I raise which error now? Login error. So is it login error is predefined or user defined? User defined. Now, okay, within try block. So whenever there is an error, you handle it by writing in which block here? Try block. So within try block, I try to input user name by saying enter. What I have to enter? User name, and I have to enter which one? Password. Okay, input. Enter what is that? Password. After that, I call the function login by sending user name and password. I call the function login by giving how many inputs here? Two inputs. The first input is user name and second input is what? Password. After that, I write which block here? Accept block. So this is an accept block and followed by which error it will raise? Login error. So here I try to display the message saying that invalid username or invalid username or what is that? Password. Invalid username or password. So is it this login error is a custom error or not? Yes. Customized error or user defined error. So enter username NAT and N123 as given invalid username or password. Username is narration N123. I can see narration. What is that? Welcome. I try to enter the username is like Suresh and S123. There is a message Suresh and what is that? Welcome. Ring honor. So if there is an error inside a login function, then it rises which error here? Login error. Login error. So this you can call it as which errors here? User defined errors are the same thing. You can call it as custom errors. User defined errors are customized errors. Okay. It is called as user defined errors. The same thing you call it as custom errors. So just try to understand how to work with this exception handling, error handling or exception handling here. So functions try except finally, try with finally. So there is a rise keyword. Okay. Custom exception, user defined exception and need of custom exception. Okay. Handling exception, try and accept the block, right? Then after this, next we'll go for another topic. So what is this topic here? Regular expressions. So let us see this regular expressions here. So this is regular expressions. So regular expressions are the same thing. You can call it as which module here? RE module. You can call it as regular expression or the same thing is called as which module? RE module. What is the name of this? RE module. RE module is that. What is the name of the module here? RE module. RE module. So it is a predefined module which comes with which software? Python software. So yeah, this is how we are learning after regular expressions. Next is what here? Files and directories. After files and directories, what is the next one here? Python logging, date time module, OS module, multi-threading, garbage collection, Python database communication, Python networking, Kinter module, and then we'll be talking about NumPy and Pandas. NumPy and Pandas, right? Now we are in this topic, regular. We are at which place? Regular expressions. So these regular expressions are very much useful in application development. Regular expressions are very important in application development. So you are using regular expressions. Okay. So many topics are there. We'll skip the topics, Guruji. क्या करेंगे बोलो? नहीं बोलना क्या? बोलना नहीं बोलना यार? बोलना नहीं बोलना यार? फिर पढ़ना है तो क्यों बोले यार? Okay. Okay, right? So this new topic will start tomorrow, right? Okay, now? Right. We'll stop here today. Naimalum. Naimalum, yeah.